My name is Darren. I'm 38 years old, and if there's one lesson life's hammered into me again and again, it's this. Money makes people show you exactly who they are. Sometimes that's good. Most of the time, not so much. Growing up, I was the quiet kid. Not the golden child, not the rebel, not even the black sheep. Just background noise. My younger brother, Tyler, was always the star. Star quarterback in high school, homecoming king, golden boy with the toothy smile and perfect hair. He had a way of making people orbit around him. I never resented him for it when we were younger. I just sort of accepted my role as the one no one noticed. But I did well for myself. I went off to college on a scholarship, worked my tail off, lived frugally, and built a solid career in real estate finance. Didn't make headlines, didn't have a fancy title, but I saved, invested smart, and by the time I was in my early 30s, I was comfortably ahead of the curve. Not flashy, just steady. Meanwhile, Tyler bounced from one sales gig to the next, always chasing the next shiny opportunity. He had charm in spades, but no follow-through. Still, people adored him, especially our parents. My mom once joked that Tyler was the fireworks show while I was the man behind the curtain. I laughed it off at the time, but it stung. Maybe more than I realized. Anyway, the story really starts about 6 months ago when my niece, Tyler's daughter, Emily, announced her engagement. I love Emily. She's the one person in the family who never made me feel invisible. Growing up, she'd call me Uncle D and send me little drawings in the mail, even when I moved across the country. When she asked me to help with the wedding, I said yes before she even finished the sentence. The wedding was going to be beautiful. Rustic barn venue, string lights, late autumn leaves. She and her fiancé had their hearts set on this one location in the Berkshires, but the price tag made it a stretch, especially since Tyler had, unsurprisingly, run into a temporary cash flow situation, his words. So Emily called me, voice trembling with that mix of hope and embarrassment. I told her not to worry. I'd take care of the venue, no strings attached. I wired the deposit that same week. Over the next few months, I helped with other things too, little bits here and there. Catering installment, florist retainer. I never made a show of it. I didn't need my name on anything. I just wanted Emily to have her day. The only time things got weird was during a family dinner a few weeks before the wedding. Tyler was telling some exaggerated story about closing a high six-figure deal, while our parents beamed like he'd just cured cancer. My mom looked over at me and said, "You should learn from your brother's confidence, Darren. You're always so reserved." I just nodded and quietly sipped my water. That's how it always went. They acted like Tyler farted gold, and I was the accountant who couldn't take a joke. Still, I let it slide. I always let it slide. Because I wasn't there for them. I was there for Emily. The morning of the wedding, I arrived early with the final check for the venue. The manager had asked that the remaining balance be paid day of. It was crisp and chilly, sun peeking through red-orange leaves. Emily looked stunning, practically glowing. She gave me a hug that lingered a second longer than usual and whispered, "Thank you. Really, I know how much you've done." That alone made it worth it. But then came the reception. Everyone was floating on champagne bubbles and string quartet melodies. I'd just handed the envelope with the final payment to the venue manager and was heading toward the buffet when I heard the clinking of a spoon on glass. Tyler had grabbed the mic. "Hey everyone, real quick before we get to dancing," he said, flashing that grin that always got him out of trouble. "I just want to thank a very special person who made this all possible." I froze mid-step. Was he actually going to acknowledge me? In public? He turned and looked right at me. Let's all give it up for the man who was never there unless a check was involved. Laughter. Scattered applause. I stood there like a statue, champagne glass in hand, smile frozen halfway between hopeful and hollow. It felt like time slowed, like everyone was looking at me, not with gratitude, but amusement. Like I was the punchline. I looked around. My mother chuckled, dabbing her eyes with a napkin like it was the best toast she'd ever heard. My father nodded approvingly. Not a single person, not even Emily, said a word. And in that moment, I realized I was never going to be anything more than a wallet to them. I didn't make a scene. I didn't storm out. I just turned around, walked calmly out the side door, and sat in my car for a moment, the cold leather seat pressing into my back. My phone sat in the cup holder. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I called my bank. "Hi, I need to put a freeze on a transfer," I said, my voice calm but firm. The representative was polite, efficient, Sure. Which transaction? I gave them the details. A transfer scheduled for Monday. Set to finalize the payment for a honeymoon suite package. One I'd quietly agreed to fund, since Tyler had mentioned he'd handle it eventually. Done, the rep said. Is there anything else I can help you with? I looked out at the barn, lit up with fairy lights, laughter spilling out through the open doors. I could see Tyler raising another toast. Probably another joke at my expense. Yeah, I said. Actually, I'd like to review all recent scheduled transfers tied to the event coordination company on file. And that was just the beginning. The list of transactions the bank rep read out sounded like a greatest hits of everything I'd quietly done to make this wedding happen. $3,000 to the florist. $4,500 for the photography package. $2,200 for the shuttle buses to get guests to the venue. And the big one, the pending $12,000 for the honeymoon resort package Tyler and his wife had picked out, pretending they'd won it in some contest. Cancel anything that hasn't cleared yet, I said, steady as stone, and flag the account for any future transfer requests from vendors related to this wedding. I'll follow up Monday with full documentation. The bank rep paused. Yes, sir. But is everything okay? I let out a quiet breath. It is now. I sat there for another minute, watching the glow of the reception from a distance. I could almost hear the speeches echoing faintly in the night air. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I was just still. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't second-guessing myself. Then I drove home. But here's where things started to get really interesting. I didn't say anything that night. Didn't respond to the few half-hearted texts Tyler sent hours later. Things like, hey, hope you didn't take the joke the wrong way, bro. Everyone laughed. It was lighthearted. And call me in the morning. We gotta go over the final honeymoon invoice stuff. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just more of the same entitled, dismissive nonsense I'd let slide for years. So the next morning, I sent one message. Just one. Call the resort. You're going to need a new reservation. And probably a new wallet. Cue chaos. I didn't even check my phone until noon. I let the missed calls pile up like snowdrifts. 23 calls. 11 voicemails. Text from my mom, my dad, Tyler, even a couple of Emily's friends. My favorites were the ones from my mom, who suddenly shifted from, I'm sure this is a misunderstanding, to, how could you do this to your own family? In under 6 hours. Apparently, it didn't take long before the cracks showed. The venue had received their final payment, sure, but the vendors? The honeymoon suite? The transportation for the post-wedding brunch? Not a dime. Tyler, who'd strutted around all night acting like he was the one who'd made it all happen, now had a mountain of invoices and very little cash to back it up. And then there was Emily. She was the only one I responded to. Her message came that afternoon. Simple. Honest. Uncle D, what happened? I didn't know he was going to say that. I didn't laugh. I swear. I took a long time to reply. I reread her message at least 10 times before I typed anything back. I didn't want to punish her. She had always been kind to me. But I couldn't pretend anymore. I know. But Emily, this wasn't just about the toast. It's been years of this. You saw it too. And I kept giving, hoping it'd change. It didn't. She responded a few minutes later with a single word. I'm sorry. And for what it's worth, I believe she meant it. Later that week, Tyler called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, the usual charming tone layered with panic. Okay, maybe I went too far. But you can't just leave us hanging like this. Em's crying. The resort is threatening to cancel, and Dad says you're being dramatic. Just call me back. We'll work something out. I'll even, I don't know, split the cost or something. Split the cost of the wedding I'd already paid most of. That's when I realized he didn't feel guilty. He wasn't sorry. He was just losing control, and control was the one thing Tyler had always had in our family. So I didn't call him back. Instead, I contacted every vendor still waiting on payment and explained the situation. I sent over itemized receipts and confirmed the charges I had authorized. I made it crystal clear that no further charges were to be billed to me, and any attempts to do so would be met with legal action. I even took it a step further. I contacted my accountant and had them draft a formal letter requesting reimbursement for any funds spent beyond the agreed-upon amount I'd promised Emily directly. I wasn't bluffing. I'd kept every email, every text, every invoice. Tyler had padded a few of the vendor costs to line his own pocket. I hadn't noticed at the time, but reviewing it all now with fresh eyes, It was obvious. And I was done playing the fool. My mom tried calling again, this time sobbing, saying how families stick together and you can't just abandon your blood like this. But she never asked how I felt. Never once acknowledged what they'd let Tyler get away with all these years. All she cared about was the optics, the fallout, the embarrassment. They thought I was just the guy who wrote checks and stayed quiet. They were wrong. But the real punch came 2 weeks later. I was sitting in my apartment, reading through the final vendor responses, when an email came in from Emily. No subject line, just her name. Inside was a photo, a wedding picture, black and white, Emily in her dress, her new husband beside her. But Tyler was nowhere in the shot. Beneath it, she'd written, "Thought you'd like this one. Also, I'm moving out. Dad's furious. But I think I finally see things clearly now. Thanks for everything. I'm sorry it took me so long." I stared at that message for a long time. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about finally being seen, finally being heard. And the real surprise? I hadn't even started my next move yet. The next few days were quiet, the kind of eerie, brittle silence that comes right before a storm. My phone didn't buzz much anymore. The family group chat had gone radio silent. No more funny memes from Aunt Debbie or passive-aggressive inspirational quotes from my mom. I think they were all waiting, watching, wondering if I'd come crawling back with some kind of apology or at least a checkbook. I didn't. Instead, I started planning. It wasn't about vengeance, not exactly. It was about clarity, closure. I'd spent years giving without being seen, showing up without being acknowledged, bending without being appreciated. And the truth is, people only respect the boundaries you enforce. I'd learned that the hard way. So I booked a flight. See, my parents live in the same house we grew up in, a big colonial in a small Connecticut suburb where everyone knows everyone, and reputations are gold. And my dad? He thrives on that reputation. Mr. Reliable, the pillar of the community, church deacon, longtime accountant, proud father of the successful Tyler Monroe. He hated that I moved away. Hated it even more when I started quietly making more than him. I never threw it in his face, but he could feel it. He once told me, "You work with numbers, Darren. But Tyler works with people." That's how he justified it. Tyler's failures were just misunderstood potential, and my success was something sterile, cold, transactional. So I figured if I was going to burn bridges, I'd do it where everyone could see the smoke. I flew in the following weekend, unannounced. Didn't text anyone. Just showed up in my rental car, dressed in a tailored coat, and carrying a sleek black portfolio. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The white siding was chipped in places. The shutters were starting to fade. Funny how that happens. The homes we grow up and shrink when we grow into ourselves. My mother answered the door. Her smile faltered the second she saw me. "Darren, we weren't expecting you." "I figured," I said calmly, stepping inside. "Where's Dad?" She opened her mouth to say something. Probably a warning, but I didn't wait. I walked straight into the den, where my father was watching golf with a half-eaten sandwich on a TV tray. He looked up, annoyed at the interruption. Then he saw me. "Darren, we need to talk," he said, like he was the one who'd been wronged. "Good," I replied, pulling a chair across from him and opening my portfolio. I handed him the first document, a full breakdown of every dollar I'd spent on Emily's wedding, with receipts and dates. It was meticulous, clear, cold. He barely skimmed it before tossing it on the coffee table. "You didn't have to do all that. You offered." I did, and I don't regret helping her. But I didn't agree to being mocked in front of the entire family. "Oh, come on," he said with a scoff. Tyler was joking. "You've always been sensitive." There it was. That word. Sensitive. The lifelong branding they'd slapped on me anytime I dared to speak up. I reached into the folder again and pulled out the next paper. This one from my attorney. A formal request for reimbursement of misused funds, along with a legal declaration that I would no longer be considered financially responsible for any family-related expenses unless agreed upon in writing. "This is ridiculous," my father said, his face reddening. "You think you're going to sue your own family?" I met his eyes. Calm. Direct. "No. I'm making sure this never happens again." And then I slid across the final item, a letter addressed to the board of trustees at the local church where he sat on the finance committee. My dad stared at it, then back at me. "What's this?" An outline of some creative accounting Tyler used while fundraising for the wedding. Turns out he listed a few donors who don't exist. Probably so he could funnel the difference into his own account. I confirmed it with the vendors. If you want to protect your name, I suggest you handle it quietly. Before I do. His hands shook slightly as he folded the letter shut. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. When I stood to leave, my mother stepped into the hallway, lips pressed into a line. You really came all this way just to humiliate us? She said. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, No, Mom. I came to stop being humiliated. The ride back to the airport was quiet, peaceful even. But the fallout? That would come soon enough. Because Tyler had just started his new job, a cushy real estate role at a boutique firm owned by one of Dad's golf buddies. The kind of role that only existed because of favors and name dropping. I had a file ready for them, too. Not to get him fired, just to show them who they were really dealing with. And as I sat in the departure lounge, sipping my coffee and staring out at the runway, my phone buzzed again. It was Emily. Dad's freaking out. I think he just realized he can't charm his way out of this one. Also, I found out something. You're not going to like it. I blinked at the screen. A slow tension crept up my spine. Then another message came through. Turns out they weren't just using your money for the wedding. There's something else. Something big. And I think you need to see it. I stared at Emily's message for a long moment, heart suddenly heavy with a familiar dread. That old knot in my chest I thought I'd untangled years ago. It had the weight of a secret. Not just a misunderstanding or misused money, but something deeper, older. And the moment I saw her next message, a photo attachment, I knew I hadn't even scratched the surface. The image showed a document. A bank statement. Not mine. Not Emily's. It was from an account I didn't recognize, held jointly by Tyler and my father. My name was listed in the memo line on several large deposits over the past 5 years. Quiet transfers made from various family trusts, investment returns, and, most gutting of all, a college fund my grandfather had once set up for me before he passed. I remembered that account. I hadn't touched it since I graduated, figured it had rolled into some long-term asset or sat dormant. But there it was, bleeding slowly into a slush fund Tyler had used for everything from vacation rentals to business development seminars in Vegas. I felt sick. Emily followed up with a final text. I found it when Dad left his laptop open. He tried to delete the files when I confronted him, but I made copies. I'll send everything. I'm sorry, Uncle D. I didn't know. I couldn't respond right away. I sat in that terminal, surrounded by strangers and noise and flickering departure boards, feeling like I'd just stepped off a cliff into a past I never consented to revisit. They'd taken my money meant for a future I'd built slowly, quietly, and funneled it through lies. And the worst part wasn't even the theft. It was that I wasn't surprised. Back home in Chicago, I got to work. First, I called my attorney. Explained everything. We scheduled a meeting to go through the financial records Emily had sent. She delivered dozens of files, statements, transaction logs. She'd even managed to get screenshots of emails between Tyler and my dad, with subject lines like, "Let's keep this quiet," and "Don't tell Darren yet. He'll ask too many questions." We filed suit within the week. No theatrics. No angry family dinners. Just a knock on the door from a process server while my dad was having coffee on his front porch. The claims were airtight. Misappropriation of funds, breach of fiduciary duty, and, most damning, fraud, both civil and criminal. Because some of the money they had siphoned came from a dormant trust that was legally under my name. Funds you can't just borrow without consent. My mother tried calling. Left a voicemail that was half sobbing and half rage. "You're destroying us, Darren. Is that what you want?" No, I thought. I never wanted this. What I wanted was a family that respected me. That didn't turn me into a punchline. That didn't steal from me and call it love. But that was never on the table. And now, the gloves were off. The legal process took months. During that time, everything changed. Their reputation in town, the thing my parents clung to like a lifeboat, took hit after hit. My father was asked to step down quietly from the church finance committee. Then the local paper caught wind of the lawsuit. Nothing scandalous, just a brief report filed under the business section. But in a small town, everyone reads the business section. Neighbors stopped waving. Friends stopped calling. Even Aunt Debbie went suspiciously quiet. Tyler, for his part, tried to spin it. He posted some half-baked Facebook rant about how money changes people, and you think you know someone until there's a will involved. A few sympathy comments trickled in. But then someone, probably Emily, posted screenshots of the financial documents right in the comments section. That post disappeared within an hour. So did Tyler's job. Turns out, the real estate firm had seen the file I sent. They'd reviewed everything and quietly rescinded his offer. Not a good fit for our culture, they said in the formal email. Translation: we don't trust you, and we don't need your drama. By the end of the year, he was selling used cars again. The settlement came 6 months later. It wasn't even close. The judge practically laughed when their attorney tried to argue that I knew about the shared account. In the end, I was awarded the full return of all stolen funds, plus interest, plus legal fees, plus a court-mandated written apology from both my father and brother. The apology was exactly what you'd expect, typed, impersonal, probably written by their lawyer. But I didn't care, because what mattered wasn't the letter. It was what came after. I donated every cent of the interest to a scholarship fund in my grandfather's name, the one who originally set up that trust for me. The fund would go to kids from families like mine, overlooked, underestimated, told to stay quiet and be grateful. As for the rest, I kept the money, and I cut off the people. No calls, no holidays, no olive branches. I didn't rage. I didn't gloat. I simply disappeared, because some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. It's been a year now. Emily still calls me sometimes. She moved out of her parents' house shortly after the lawsuit ended, got her own apartment, started her own business. She sends me photos of her dog, asks about real estate tips, tells me about how she's finally going to therapy. You're the only adult in this family who ever treated me like an equal, she told me once. Like I wasn't just another extension of Dad's ego. That meant more than she probably realized. Sometimes I wonder if my parents sit at their dining room table and wonder how it all went wrong. I wonder if they miss me, if they regret anything. But that's not my burden anymore. They gambled everything, their dignity, their name, their son, for a few extra checks and the illusion of control. And in the end, they lost. Not just the lawsuit, but me. And I won't be back.